I don't know if you're like me, but I suspect you are. Building a project and you have a small piece of material that you're going to use for the project. You have no extra material and there's a defect in the wood, but you want to use that wood anyway. How do you take care of that defect? In this case, I'm using gum cherry, and there is a small check that opened up on one of my pieces. I'm actually going to continue to move forward with the project and use this piece, and I think the owner will appreciate it. But what I'm going to do is fill the check with black epoxy. And that's something I do frequently with cherry. Oftentimes there'll be a small open check or even a small knot that makes its way through the wood. And I actually think that's a nice feature and something that I try not to eliminate from a project. And what I do is I just fill that area with black epoxy and then use a cabinet scraper and scrape it back down to the surface so it's flush and smooth. And then when you apply finish, it actually looks very nice. And I'm going to show you how I'm going to do that on this project. There is a small check that has appeared. I think you'll be able to appreciate it right there. And also two small splits in between these holes. I think this can be salvaged, and I'm going to show you how I'm going to do it. To do that, I'm going to use 5-minute epoxy, and I'll use TransTint black dye. You could also use various shades of brown, which would work as well. Now, to prevent the epoxy from running out into the holes that I've bored, I've made a couple of small dams. These are just 3/4 inch plastic tubes. I've applied a little artist masking tape and then a thin film of paste beeswax so that the epoxy does not stick to the masking tape. So we'll mix up a fair amount of epoxy here just so it can blend well with the black dye. You got to be prepared for interruptions here. This is the 4th time I've mixed up this epoxy. I've got interrupted by a couple of phone calls, and my son needed some help with a project, so you never know if you're going to actually make it all the way through this. So now just use a little stir stick. Make sure that this is blended well. Now I've taken another stick and I've just whittled the end flat so it's a small spatula. This makes it easy to apply the epoxy where you need it to go. Probably would be a good idea if I wore a pair of gloves. I didn't do that, but so I'm just applying a small amount of epoxy, and I'll smooth it down into these 2 cracks. Basically, I'm just laying a little string down right on the cracks, and then I'll come back and use a cabinet scrape to bring that back down to the surface, and that'll remove any of the epoxy on the surface and level it out. Now the last step I do is I'll take a little heat gun and direct the heat. It's not very hot, just mild heat on the epoxy, and that'll just help it flow into the cracks. But it will also, any little air bubbles will rise to the surface. All right, all I need to do now is to let that dry and then scrape it down, and that'll be a nice filling for those cracks that will actually blend pretty well once the cherry is finished. Okay, well, I think you can see how well this black epoxy worked. It has nicely filled these cracks, and I will be finishing this now with oil and wax, and by the time the finish is on, this will blend in and will look like the natural streaks in cherry. Well, it might be hard to appreciate, but after I vacuumed this piece to get ready to glue up, I noticed that there was a small crack right here that I missed initially, and I'm going to fill that with CA glue and some cherry sawdust. So I resanded the piece, I left the sawdust in the crack, I gently packed it in with my finger, and now I'm going to apply some CA glue and some accelerator. My glasses on. Starting to require glasses, everything I do. So I just need a little drop. I'm going to take a little paper towel and just get the excess glue. Now I'll put a little spray of accelerator on there. And then I will sand that back down, and this will not be visible at all. It'll be totally invisible repair.